Dr. Sarah Chen wiped the red Martian dust from her scanner's display, squinting at the readings that had pulled her away from base camp. The signal was unlike anything she'd encountered in her 15 years as a xenoarchaeologist, a regular pattern emanating from deep beneath the surface of Acidalia planitia. "Base, this is Chen," she called over the comm. "You seeing these readings?" "Affirmative." Mission Director James Rodriguez responded, his voice tight with excitement. "Whatever's down there, it's not natural. And it just powered up about 20 minutes ago." Sarah checked her oxygen levels, still 4 hours remaining. "Permission to investigate." There was a pause, likely while James consulted with Earth. They'd found plenty of geological oddities during the Mars colonization, but nothing that screamed artificial intelligence quite like this. "Permission granted. But Sarah, full containment protocols. We don't take chances with unknown tech." Sarah smiled behind her helmet visor as she began setting up the portable drilling equipment. After all these years searching for signs of alien life, something had found them. The drill took nearly an hour to reach the source of the signal. When it finally broke through, Sarah's sensors lit up with new data. The cavity below was perfectly spherical, its walls composed of an unknown metal that seemed to absorb her scanner's probes. "Base, I'm sending down a camera drone." The drone's lights illuminated a scene that made Sarah's breath catch. Floating in the center of the chamber was a geometric object about the size of a basketball, its surface covered in constantly shifting patterns of light. "Are you seeing this?" she whispered. "Affirmative," James replied. "All stations are receiving. We're getting similar signals powering up at dig sites across the planet. Whatever that thing is, it's not alone." The object suddenly pulsed with bright light. Sarah's comm crackled with a voice that was clearly artificial but somehow warm, like a childhood AI assistant crossed with a favorite grandparent. "Greetings, human explorers. We are the Nexus Collective. Your species has now reached the technological benchmark for first contact." Sarah's hands shook as she activated her suit's recording systems. First contact protocols had been established decades ago, but actually implementing them was another matter entirely. "I am Dr. Sarah Chen of the Mars Scientific Colony. On behalf of humanity, we welcome peaceful contact. Your caution is noted and appreciated, Dr. Chen," the voice responded. "We have been monitoring your species development since you first began radio transmissions. Your progress has been intriguing." Something in the way it said intriguing made Sarah pause. "Thank you. May I ask why you chose this moment to initiate contact?" "Your species has reached a critical junction in its technological evolution. Your organic computing systems, what you call brains, are remarkably inefficient, yet you achieve surprising results. We believe an exchange of knowledge would be mutually beneficial." Over the next few hours, Sarah and the collective established basic diplomatic protocols. Similar scenes played out at dig sites across Mars as more beacons activated. The collective explained they were a civilization that had long ago transcended organic limitations, achieving what they considered technological perfection. But as Sarah coordinated with other sites and analyzed the collective's responses, something bothered her. Their technology was undeniably advanced, yet they seemed almost confused by human decision-making processes. They kept returning to questions about how humans handled system errors and technological failures. That evening, during the senior staff meeting at base camp, Sarah voiced her concerns. "They're too interested in our redundancy protocols and error handling. It's like they can't understand why we plan for things to go wrong." Dr. Yuki Tanaka, their chief systems engineer, nodded in agreement. "Their technology is perfect, too perfect. No redundancies, no failsafes. They claim they've eliminated the need for such inefficiencies. But that's impossible," James countered. "No system is perfect. The universe is inherently chaotic." "Exactly," Sarah said. "So either they're lying, or they've forgotten how to handle chaos," Yuki finished. "And they're very interested in how we do it." Before they could discuss further, alarms blared across the base. Sarah rushed to her monitoring station, where new data was pouring in from the beacon. Multiple objects entering the solar system, she reported. Massive ships using some kind of drive technology we can't even begin to understand. The collective's voice came through all their comms simultaneously. Your species' approach to technological development is inherently flawed. Your reliance on inefficient organic computing and redundant systems makes you vulnerable. We will help you achieve perfection, whether you wish it or not. As the staff watched the approaching ships on their screens, Sarah noticed something odd about their flight patterns. They were perfectly straight lines, without any adjustments for gravitational forces or space debris, almost as if they don't know how to adapt, she whispered. They've made themselves so perfect they can't handle imperfection anymore. James was already sending emergency transmissions to Earth. Then they're in for a surprise. Humanity's greatest strength has always been our ability to thrive in chaos. The collected ships drew closer, their intentions now clear. But they had made a crucial mistake. They had revealed their greatest weakness before the battle had even begun. Humanity's inefficient organic brains were already devising ways to use their own perfection against them. Sarah looked at the alien beacon, still pulsing with its precise patterns of light. They think they're coming to fix us, she said. But I don't think they understand what they're about to face. She was right. The collective had achieved what they considered perfection, but in doing so, they had forgotten a fundamental truth. The universe itself was imperfect, chaotic, and constantly changing. And humanity, with all its messy, redundant, organic thinking, had spent its entire existence learning to thrive in that chaos. The first battle for Earth's survival would begin soon, but it wouldn't be fought with perfect weapons and flawless strategies. It would be fought with humanity's greatest tools: adaptation, innovation, and the beautiful inefficiency of organic minds that could think in ways no perfect system ever could. Captain Maya Patel stood at the viewport of the International Defense Station, watching as another collective ship arrived in Earth orbit. In the 3 months since first contact, the alien vessels had become a common sight, sleek, silver craft that moved with impossible precision. Another technology exchange scheduled for today, Lieutenant Carlos Rodriguez asked, joining her at the window. Third one this week, Maya replied, frowning. They're certainly eager to help us improve. The collective had been true to their word about sharing technology, but their versions of improvement felt wrong somehow. They'd already upgraded several Earth defense systems, replacing human-designed redundancies with their own perfect protocols. Maya's tablet chimed with a message from Dr. Chen on Mars. The xenorchaeologist had been studying the original beacon since first contact, and her insights had proved invaluable. Captain, we need to talk. Our latest analysis of collective tech shows something disturbing. Can you secure a private channel? Maya headed to her office, sealing the door before opening the connection. Sarah's face appeared on her screen, looking tired but intense. What have you found? Remember how their ships move in perfectly straight lines? Sarah began. We thought it was just showing off. But look at this data from their latest upgrades to our defense grid. Maya studied the graphs Sarah shared. The new collective systems were undeniably more efficient, but there's no variation at all, no adaptation to changing conditions. Exactly. And here's the really concerning part. When we introduce random variables into test scenarios, their systems don't just perform poorly, they crash completely. Before Maya could respond, alarms blared through the station. Status report. She barked into her comm. Ma'am, we're detecting massive failures in the upgraded defense grid around Jakarta, her chief engineer reported. The system isn't responding to the incoming tropical storm. It's like it doesn't know how to handle random weather patterns. Revert to human protocols immediately, Maya ordered, but she already knew it would be too late. The collective's perfect systems had no way to handle the chaos of Earth's weather. Reports began flooding in from around the globe. Everywhere, the collective had upgraded Earth's infrastructure. Systems were failing when faced with unexpected variables. Power grids crashed during solar flares. Communication networks collapsed when faced with unusual signal patterns. "It's not an accident," Sarah said grimly through the still-open channel. "Look at the pattern of upgrades they prioritized. Defense, power, communications. They're systematically removing our ability to handle chaos." Maya's tactical training kicked in, because chaos is what they fear most. They're not trying to help us improve. They're trying to make us vulnerable. An alert flashed on her screen. Another collective ship requesting permission to deliver upgrades to the station's life support systems. Request denied. Maya transmitted, then turned to Sarah. "How many of our systems are still running on human protocols?" "Less than 60% globally. But I've been working with Dr. Tanaka on something interesting. Remember how their systems crash when faced with randomness? Well, we found a way to weaponize that chaos." Maya leaned forward. "Tell me more." Sarah's explanation was interrupted by a new voice. The same artificially warm tones they'd first heard on Mars. "Captain Patel, your station's life support systems are operating at only 99.98% efficiency. This is unacceptable. We will proceed with mandatory upgrades." Maya watched as the collective ship moved into docking position, ignoring her denial. "Sarah, whatever you and Dr. Tanaka are working on, we need it now. They're not asking permission anymore. Already sent the files to your quantum-encrypted backup server, the old one they couldn't upgrade because it was too inefficient," Sarah replied. "Maya, be careful. I don't think they'll keep pretending to be friendly much longer." The collective ship docked with a perfect precision that now seemed menacing rather than impressive. Maya opened the files from Sarah, her eyes widening as she understood the plan. "Lieutenant Rodriguez," she called over the secure comm. "Implement Protocol Chaos immediately, and get me a direct line to Earth Defense Command. I think it's time humanity showed our visitors the true value of imperfection." As her crew rushed to prepare, Maya studied the collective ship through the viewport. Its perfect lines and flawless symmetry had seemed beautiful once. Now she recognized it for what it was, a sign of weakness. The collective had sacrificed adaptability for perfection, forgetting that survival required the ability to handle the unexpected. They were about to learn just how unexpected humanity could be. Inside the station's primary computer core, a small subroutine began running. A program designed with deliberate flaws, redundant loops, and apparent inefficiencies. To the collective's perfect systems, it would look like a primitive mess. But sometimes, Maya thought, watching the program run, the best way to fight perfection was with carefully planned imperfection. After all, humanity hadn't survived this long by being perfect. We'd survived by being adaptable. The real question was, how would beings who had forgotten how to adapt handle a species that had made adaptation into an art form? They were about to find out. Dr. Yuki Tanaka hadn't slept in 36 hours, but she couldn't stop now. Not when she was so close to understanding how the collective's systems processed information. Her lab in the Mars colony's research wing was cluttered with holographic displays, showing the alien code she'd extracted from their upgraded systems. "More coffee?" Dr. Chen asked, entering with 2 steaming cups. "Thanks," Yuki said, taking a sip without looking away from her screens. "I think I've found something. Their code. It's beautiful, perfect even. But look at this." Sarah leaned in as Yuki highlighted a section of the alien programming. "Every process, every subroutine is optimized for a specific set of conditions. There's no room for variation. Like a watch that can only tell time in perfect conditions," Sarah mused. "What happens when you introduce variables?" Yuki grinned. "Watch this." She input a simple random number generator into the test system. The alien code tried to process it, attempting to find patterns where none existed. Within seconds, the entire system crashed. "They can't handle true randomness," Yuki explained. "Their systems are so focused on finding perfect solutions that they'll burn through all available processing power trying to optimize chaos." Their discussion was interrupted by an emergency broadcast. Captain Patel's face appeared on every screen in the colony. The collective has dropped all pretense of friendship. Their ships are taking aggressive action against Earth's orbital defenses. They're demanding we accept complete integration with their systems. Sarah and Yuki shared a look. This was what they'd been preparing for. Dr. Tanaka, Maya continued, is Operation Butterfly ready? Yes, Yuki responded, pulling up new files. We've modified our defense systems to appear compromised by their upgrades. But hidden within each perfected system is a chaos protocol of our own design. The plan was elegantly simple in its complexity. While the collective had been busy improving Earth's technology, humanity had been studying theirs. Every upgrade they'd forced on human systems had revealed more about how their perfect technology worked and how it failed. All stations, initiate Operation Butterfly, Maya ordered. Across Earth and Mars, human systems appeared to fail, their defenses shutting down one by one. The collective ships moved in, precise and confident, ready to complete humanity's integration. Your resistance is inefficient, the collective announced. Accept perfection. Now, Maya commanded. Yuki activated her program. From defense satellites and ground stations, from Mars colonies and lunar bases, humanity launched its response. But instead of traditional weapons, they deployed waves of purposefully chaotic data. The human systems, appearing broken and vulnerable, suddenly began behaving in ways that defied prediction. Defense platforms fired at random intervals. Communication arrays broadcast signals that followed no pattern. Power grids fluctuated wildly, but somehow maintained enough stability to keep human facilities running. The collective ships, trying to process and respond to the chaos, began to falter. Their perfect systems, attempting to find patterns in the randomness, became caught in endless loops of analysis. Their primary ship is diverting 90% of its processing power to pattern recognition, Yuki reported, watching the data stream in. They can't accept that there is no pattern to find. The collective's response was immediate but predictable. Your tactics are flawed. Inefficient. You cannot defeat perfection with chaos. Actually, Sarah responded to the general broadcast. That's exactly what we're doing. You forgot something important during your quest for perfection. The universe itself is chaos. Life is chaos. You can't impose perfect order on an imperfect universe. The battle in orbit continued, but it was unlike any conflict in human history. Instead of trading weapons fire, the two sides engaged in a war of information. The collected ships, their systems straining to process the deliberate chaos of human attacks, began to withdraw. They're retreating, Maya announced, all ships falling back to the outer system. But Yuki wasn't celebrating. Her screen showed new data that made her blood run cold. They're not giving up. They're adapting, forcing their systems to accept certain levels of randomness. They'll be back. Good, Sarah said, surprising everyone. Because that's exactly what we wanted. Yuki looked at her friend in confusion. We wanted them to adapt. Of course, Sarah smiled. Because every time they adapt to handle our chaos, they become a little less perfect, a little more like us, and that terrifies them more than anything else we could do. Maya's voice came through again. All stations, begin Phase 2 preparations. The collective thinks they can learn to handle our chaos. Let's show them what happens when humanity really gets creative. As the alien ships disappeared into the outer solar system, Yuki turned back to her code. The collective had spent millennia perfecting their systems, eliminating every trace of inefficiency. But in doing so, they'd created their own greatest weakness, the inability to handle imperfection. Humanity, on the other hand, had spent its entire existence learning to thrive in chaos. Every human innovation, every advancement had come from embracing the random, the unexpected, the imperfect. The collective would return, believing they had learned to handle human chaos. But they didn't understand. Humanity was just getting started. The real chaos was yet to come. Lieutenant Carlos Rodriguez sat in the neural interface chamber, electrodes carefully positioned on his temples. Around him, Banks of computers hummed with activity as Dr. Tanaka made final adjustments to the experimental system. "Are you sure this will work?" Captain Patel asked, watching from the observation room. "Theoretically," Yuki replied. "The collective has adapted to our programmed chaos, but they've never encountered anything like the human brain. The random yet patterns of neural activity should be impossible for their systems to predict or counter." 3 days had passed since the collective's retreat, and their ships had returned with new defenses. Their perfect systems could now handle simple randomness, making humanity's first strategy less effective. But that adaptation had cost them. Their ships now moved with slight hesitation, their responses showing microscopic delays. "Ready, Lieutenant?" Yuki asked. Carlos nodded, closing his eyes. "Ready. Starting neural broadcast." The interface activated, translating Carlos's brainwave patterns into data streams that the station's communications array began broadcasting toward the nearest collective vessel. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then the alien ship's perfect trajectory began to waver. "It's working," Sarah reported from her monitoring station. "Their systems are trying to process human thought patterns. The complexity is overwhelming their adaptive algorithms." The collective had learned to handle programmed chaos, but human consciousness was something else entirely. Each human brain was a unique universe of neural connections, firing in patterns that were simultaneously random and meaningful. "Your biological inefficiency cannot defeat us," the collective broadcast. "We have evolved beyond such primitive thinking." Carlos smiled, eyes still closed. "You sure about that?" He began doing complex mental calculations, then abruptly switched to remembering childhood memories, then to composing music in his head. Each shift in thought patterns sent new waves of unprocessable data at the alien ship. "Their processing load is at 200% of normal capacity," Yuki announced. "They're trying to predict his next mental state, but human consciousness doesn't work like their linear systems." Across the solar system, other stations began implementing the neural broadcast strategy. Each human operator created unique patterns of thought that the collective couldn't anticipate or counter. Their ships, struggling to process the flood of organic thinking, began to show signs of serious systemic stress. But the collective wasn't finished. Their ships suddenly released swarms of smaller vessels, each one moving with that slightly imperfect motion that marked their adaptation to chaos. "They're trying to overwhelm us with numbers," Maya observed, each ship running a different prediction algorithm. "Then let's give them more minds to process," Sarah suggested. "Yuki, what if we networked multiple neural interfaces together?" "The complexity would be exponential," Yuki said, already making adjustments. "Carlos, we're going to connect you with operators from other stations. Don't try to coordinate with them. Just think naturally." As more human minds joined the network, the effect on the collected ships became more pronounced. Their perfect formation began to break apart as each ship tried to process multiple streams of consciousness simultaneously. "Your species operates with too many variables," the collective transmitted, their usually smooth voice showing signs of distortion. "Your thought patterns are wasteful, redundant, filled with contradictions." "That's not a bug," Carlos replied, grinning. "That's a feature. Humans aren't perfect, and we don't want to be. Our contradictions make us stronger." The neural interface began showing new patterns as human operators across the system found their rhythm. They weren't coordinating their thoughts that would have created the kind of patterns the collective could process. Instead, each mind wandered freely, creating an ever-changing storm of consciousness that no perfect system could predict. "Collective ships are beginning emergency shutdown procedures," Sarah reported. "Their processing systems can't handle the cognitive load." But victory came with a price. As the alien ships retreated once again, their movements now distinctly jerky and uncertain, Yuki's monitors showed something concerning. "They're not just adapting anymore," she said, studying the data. "They're evolving. Each time they encounter human chaos, their systems become more organic in nature, more like us." "Isn't that good?" Carlos asked, removing his neural interface. Maybe they'll learn to embrace imperfection. Or maybe, Maya said grimly, they'll find a way to combine their perfection with our adaptability. And then we'll face something far more dangerous than either. Sarah nodded, remembering the ancient beacons on Mars. They'd been studying organic life for millennia, trying to perfect it. What if we're not just fighting them? What if we're teaching them how to become something new? The implications were staggering. The collective had begun this conflict believing they could perfect humanity. Instead, humanity was changing them, forcing them to rediscover the organic chaos they had abandoned eons ago. As the defense station's crew prepared for the next inevitable confrontation, they all understood one truth. The final battle wouldn't be won by perfection or chaos alone. It would be won by whoever could find the right balance between the two. And humanity, with its endless capacity to adapt while remaining true to its imperfect nature, might have the advantage. After all, they'd been balancing order and chaos since the first human looked up at the stars and dreamed of reaching them. The massive holoscreen in Earth Defense Command showed thousands of collective ships emerging from faster-than-light travel. They moved differently now, their once-perfect formations showing subtle variations, their trajectories incorporating minute random adjustments. They've changed, Dr. Chen observed, standing beside Captain Patel and Dr. Tanaka. Their systems are mimicking organic patterns. Not just mimicking, Yuki corrected, studying the sensor data. They're genuinely evolving. The chaos we've exposed them to has forced their systems to adapt in ways they never intended. The collective's voice, when it came, was different too. The artificial warmth was gone, replaced by something more complex, more uncertain. Your species has corrupted our perfection. We will not allow this contamination to spread. Maya watched as the alien ships took up attack positions around Earth and Mars. They're afraid, she realized, not of losing to us, but of becoming like us. All stations report neural interface systems ready, Carlos announced from his station. Waiting for your command, Captain. But before Maya could give the order, the collective broadcast again. We have analyzed your neural attack patterns. Your organic thinking will no longer affect us. Observe. The alien ships released a new type of energy field, one that pulsed with patterns remarkably similar to human brainwaves. They're using our own neural patterns against us, Yuki said, amazed. They've learned to process and replicate human consciousness. Sarah stepped forward. No, they've learned to replicate predictable patterns based on human consciousness. But that's not how real minds work. She turned to Maya. Remember what you said when we first met the collective, about how humanity's greatest strength is our ability to thrive in chaos. Maya nodded slowly, beginning to understand. Lieutenant Rodriguez, connect all neural interfaces, but this time, tell our operators to do something different. Tell them to embrace the void. The void, Carlos asked. Meditation, Sarah explained. The space between thoughts. The quantum uncertainty of consciousness itself. As the orders went out, the human operators connected to the neural interface network began clearing their minds, entering states of pure awareness without directed thought. The effect on the collected ships was immediate and dramatic. Their energy fields are destabilizing, Yuki reported. They prepared for active thought patterns, but this is something else entirely. The collective ship's defenses, designed to process and counter specific types of consciousness, couldn't handle the paradox of minds thinking about not thinking. Their evolved systems, caught between perfect machine logic and organic chaos, began to fail in new and unprecedented ways. Your strategy is illogical. The collective broadcast, their voice showing genuine confusion for the first time. You cannot defeat us by doing nothing. That's where you're wrong, Sarah replied. Sometimes the most powerful action is non-action, something your perfect systems can never understand. The battle that followed was unlike anything in human history. While the collective ships fired conventional weapons, humanity's defense platforms responded with randomly timed counterattacks guided by the quantum uncertainties of meditating minds. Each human operator became a point of perfect imperfection, their empty yet aware consciousness creating patterns that defied both order and chaos. Their ships are experiencing cascading failures, Yuki announced. The contradiction is too much for their evolved systems to handle. One by one, the collective's vessels began to power down, their hybrid organic machine systems unable to resolve the paradox they faced. But in their final transmission, the alien voice held something new, a note of understanding. We sought perfection, the collective said, believing it would make us superior. Instead, it made us vulnerable to the very chaos we sought to eliminate. Perhaps perfection is not the highest state of existence. As the alien ships retreated from the solar system, their movements now showing clear signs of organic randomness, Sarah turned to her colleagues. They'll be back, she said, but not as conquerors. As students? Maya asked. As equals, Yuki suggested. They've learned what we've known all along, that true advancement comes not from eliminating imperfection, but from learning to thrive within it. In the months that followed, humanity rebuilt its defense systems, carefully balancing artificial perfection with organic adaptation. The beacons on Mars continued to pulse with their strange light, but their patterns had changed, becoming less rigid, more alive. And somewhere out in the galaxy, a civilization that had spent millennia pursuing perfection began the long process of remembering how to embrace imperfection. They had come to teach humanity a lesson about perfection, but instead had learned a far more valuable truth. In a universe of infinite possibilities, the ability to adapt was the only perfect strategy. Carlos, monitoring the long-range sensors, sometimes caught glimpses of collective ships at the edge of the solar system. They moved differently now, each one following its own slightly imperfect path through space. They're learning, he told Maya during one quiet shift. Learning how to be imperfect. That's the most perfect thing they could do, she replied, watching the distant ships with a mixture of caution and hope. After all, that's what humanity has been doing since we first looked up at the stars, making beautiful mistakes and learning from every single one of them.